right, Sarah Jane, I think that do you want to get things started for us?
Absolutely. It's an honor. Thanks for having me. And glad to be here. I just want to let you know this will be an experiential workshop. So we are going to actually meditate together a couple of times at least. So just setting that expectation. I'll also be looking at notes and sharing slides as well. Don't worry, you won't be meditating for an hour. But I love to talk about mindfulness and, well, who doesn't? It's such a buzzword these days. So that's what we'll be doing. And I want to just put out there at the very start what mindfulness is, even though we'll unpack it in a few more minutes. But just to be clear, because it's such a buzzword and a household word, it's been applied in contexts where it doesn't really belong, and the meaning has gotten a little fuzzy, right? So mindfulness, you may hear, is a quality of attention or a state of mind, and that is right, absolutely. And the practice comes from Buddhism. It's been secularized, but I just want to note that it is rooted in tradition. And it's, for having been rooted in a tradition and developed for centuries that way, it's amazing how relevant it is to contemporary life. And the reason why is that it was designed to alleviate suffering. So the Buddhists would say suffering, they use that word, or the Pali word for suffering, to mean mental distress. So we can think of mindfulness as a tool for meeting mental distress or de-stressing a stressed mind. You cannot get more relevant than that. So before we go too much further, I would love to have a sense of who is here in the group. And so for those of you who are willing to turn your video camera on, that would be great. And it is, of course, not required. But I invite you to, and there will be a couple of times where a show of hands would be useful as we start to unpack these concepts and start to share what we know of them. Thank you. Okay, so wonderful. Some more people showing up.
And I wanted to chime in and invite questions or comments. They can be private towards myself or Christine, not to take away from Sarah Jane's presentation. So if you have something that comes to mind, feel free to pop in and do a chat. And this workshop is designed to be as interactive as you'd like it to be and as informative as you'd like it to be. And afterwards, we'll be providing via email our contact information. So if something comes to you later on, you'll have access to us if you have any questions or comments.
Great. Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you all. So I understand that New Ventura has offices in North Carolina, Colorado, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. And so I have a sense that everyone joining is likely in the United States. So those of you who are on camera, maybe just give me a nod if that's at least true for you. Okay. And then I'm particularly curious if anybody is working remotely from the Cambridge office and therefore in Eastern Massachusetts. Do we have any Massachusetts folks here?
I don't think anybody's on.
Too bad, too bad. The Studio B, of course, is out of Pennsylvania, but I'm in Boston. So I was hoping that, as the crow flies, I might be near some of you. In any case, it doesn't matter where we are, right? It's interesting how these days geography almost doesn't matter when it comes to collective experience. So we are actually collectively experiencing some stress that is brand new, no matter where we are. And I'm talking right now about the pandemic. And I just want to acknowledge that there are qualities to this particular circumstance that make it particularly stressful. Number one, it's brand new. None of us have experienced anything like this before. And it doesn't have a location or a contained amount of time, right? So like a hurricane can blow in and make landfall and wreak havoc and then move on or dissipate. And resources can be brought into that particular geographic location, and a period of rehabilitation can begin among people and their homes and businesses and economy. But what we have here upon us is so much more uncertain. It's not located geographically, and nor is it located in time, right? There's a lot of uncertainty about the time frame here. So it's not, the pandemic is not contained like a hurricane. Well, it's not contained very much well at all, I guess we could say. So I also want to acknowledge that we share, since we're in the US, the backdrop of a huge increase in social unrest. And that's also a situation that can be stressful and has no certain trajectory. A lot of uncertainty here too, right? So I'm thinking about how we don't know how it's going to unfold. We don't know if necessary change will come. Many of us don't know yet exactly what our role could or should be in it. So just to say that we're all living and working under circumstances that we've never dealt with before, and you've had to be adaptable and creative, and maybe you've had to pivot really quickly, or maybe you've had to be incredibly patient at times. So, you know, mindfulness is really designed to support that kind of living that creates such stress and uncertainty. And I just want to note too that when we're well supported in these times with tools such as mindfulness, of course, we can navigate them more easily and with resilience, and there can be that hope that they result in positive change. So I care very much about this practice, as you can tell, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. I'm going to share my screen so we can unpack a little bit more about mindfulness. Let's see here. Okay. Can you all see my screen, a title screen? Okay, wonderful. So we're here to talk about mindfulness and its value right now. I want to let you know how this hour is going to unfold. That we can be somewhat certain of. So we will practice together. There will be at least 2 practice experiences. And we'll talk about, at the very beginning, of course, what mindfulness is, what mindfulness meditation is, the benefits of mindfulness, how mindfulness can operate for us during crisis, and how to practice regularly, right? So how to make this part of your life. And by the end, I want to share with you 3 mindfulness breaks. These are shorter practices that you can lean on in the moment during your day when something comes up, sort of an as needed practice. Great. So what is mindfulness? Studio B uses this definition: moment by moment awareness of what is here now without needing it to be anything other than what it is. So I often hear that abbreviated. It's quite popular to hear it as paying attention in the present moment without judgment. So those 3 aspects of the definition, I think, are quite important. It's paying attention in the present moment without judgment. So there are a lot of things that mindfulness is not. It's not resistant. It's not denying of what is going on. It's not rumination, and it's not regret. So it is receptive and open. It's about meeting what's here, and then not taking a bunch of other steps of story making and analysis and evaluation. So I'm curious because, of course, many of us understand very well what mindfulness is, and there's probably a lot of wisdom in this room about it. So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other. And I'm just curious if anyone, maybe one or two people, would be willing to come off mute and just offer what their understanding is. Maybe there are some words I haven't used or phrases I haven't used that you'd like to share. This is a mindful pause as I challenge some of you. Okay. All right, well, then I'm going to assume that my definition is sufficient, and we'll move on. Okay, so back to the slides. So what is mindfulness meditation? Okay, so that's a little bit different. Mindfulness meditation is a sustaining of mindfulness, right? And so meditation, of course, there are lots of different styles. And the style of meditation where we sustain mindfulness, we will often use an object or a domain in which to direct our mindfulness. So it's typical to establish mindfulness on an object or in one of 4 domains. And every mindfulness course that I know of focuses on 4 domains, and that's because traditionally it was taught that mindfulness should and could be established in 4 domains or areas of experience. Studio B focuses on breath, body, feelings, and mind. And I should say, however, that the practice is really accessible and adaptable, and there are so many different ways to practice mindfulness out there. These are just sort of more formal ways to start the process, and it's been adapted in lots of ways. So maybe what I'm describing isn't yet similar to your experience, and that would make sense. Okay, so I would love a show of hands, so I'm going to go back to the folks who are on video and just know, are there any meditators of any style here with us right now? No hands? Oh, we've got a hand. Great. We've got a hand and a definite no. Great. Are there any occasional meditators, or anybody dip their toes? Anybody dipped their toe before? Or maybe, yeah, by now, I would imagine a couple people have, yeah, and sometimes they're exposed to it in a yoga class or something like that, right? Yeah, sure. So, you know, speaking of yoga, you just think, if you're somebody who has practiced yoga, or if you like quiet activities alone, or to walk in the woods, or maybe if you've had occasion to sit bedside with someone who is sick or dying and there's nothing to be done, you can only lend your presence. Or if you are an athlete, say a runner or a swimmer, and you've gotten into some sense of flow during a workout where your attention is very refined and you know exactly what's going on. If any of those things are true, and many other experiences, then you definitely have an experience with mindfulness. So congratulations. So we're going to practice. And before we do, I just want to give you a couple of tips and dispel a couple of myths. I really care about dispelling myths when it comes to mindfulness, because I think that it provides an inroad where there aren't expectations that make it feel hard. So the first myth is that if you get distracted a lot, then you can't meditate. So right, we've all heard people say, well, oh, I can't meditate, I get too distracted. So it's kind of like people who say, I can't do yoga because I can't touch my toes, right? So these practices are there to help us cultivate a skill. And so I just want to emphasize that if you get distracted a lot, it's not a problem. It's the intention and the attitude that matter. I want to reorient you toward that and to be lighthearted about distraction. I want to normalize it for you. Many meditation teachers spend a lot of time at the beginning with beginner students saying, you will get distracted. It's absolutely true. It's the first thing that we notice when we start noticing things, when we start applying our mindfulness. There's a story I want to share, or a simile actually, where there's a river that is it's flowing, but deep and slow. And so the surface of the river is quiet, it's still. You wouldn't know what's going on underneath. And so let's see, what do I have here? I have a marker. So if you were to take a stick and put it in the river vertically until the bottom of the stick touches the riverbed, and the top of the stick is above the surface of the water. As you know, if you're picturing this, what would happen is there would be a ripple, a wake. If that's going downstream, this wake would form. And so it would be revealed that there's a lot going on underneath. So you can think of mindfulness as that stick. And so until we apply mindfulness, we don't really know perhaps what's happening. We're not aware. A lot is under the line of consciousness. If consciousness is above, there's a lot below that we're unconscious, unaware of. So another thing that I'd like to share with you that might help you before we begin practice is that this meditation is not about emptying the mind and not thinking at all. And I think about how, you know, for centuries, millennia, artists have been rendering the Buddha from various corners of the world, always still, eyes perhaps closed or gently open. And I always got from that we were meant to see that he was peaceful. There's nothing going on, absolute stillness. And that's true, but I just want to share that since I've become a mindfulness meditator, one of the things I get from that, from seeing statues of the Buddha, I get that he's listening. He's paying close attention. That's what is being rendered or depicted by those artists for us. So I want to assure you too that you don't need to try so hard. So mindfulness is not about making something happen or enforcing anything. In fact, it won't work if you are applying too much effort, and it really requires relaxing. And in fact, there's a great simile. If you can imagine a guitar with strings that are loosened up, and there's no tension in them at all, it can't be played. But a guitar that has strings that are tightened too much will be out of tune, the strings might break, so it also cannot be played. And so we can think about our effort as we go into mindfulness practice as balanced. We don't want to be too high strung about it. We don't want to be seeking and enforcing. And also we don't want to be too loose about it so that there's a lot of laxity and confusion and dullness. So the strings of a guitar, keep that in mind in terms of the effort you'll want to apply. And finally, a bit about posture. So posture matters, but maybe not in the way you think. So you do not have to sit cross-legged or on your shins or in any way that you've seen in a magazine or in a movie. And you probably don't need me to tell you this, but I just want to encourage you, if you're going to take up meditation practice, to find a posture that suits you, in which you can feel relaxed and stable. One final note, because we're about to take up a posture, each of us, is that if you arrive to this workshop feeling a little high-strung, maybe there's something going on at work, maybe there's a lot of busyness of mind, a lot of thinking or overactivity in your system, I would say lie down for the meditation, because that's going to antidote that busyness, right? And it's going to give you a sense of calm. Also, making sure you close your eyes will assist in that way. On the other hand, if you arrived tired, let me see, in some time zones, it's after lunch. And so if there's a sluggishness or a sleepiness to how you feel, make sure you sit up. So that will antidote the laxity with a little bit of clarity, especially when we make sure that our spines are upright, either because there's a pillow between us and our chair back, or we're just holding our spines up without any support behind us. That can really lend some alertness to the practice. Okay, so that was a long lead in, and I'm eager to practice with you. Those of you who turned on your video cameras, if you prefer to turn them off for practice, that's fine. And I invite you to come into the posture that feels like it might serve you best, given what I've described about effort, balance, and bringing clarity to sluggishness, or bringing ease to overactivity. So I have a bowl here that I'll chime once to begin, and I'll chime it 3 times to end. And in between, I'm going to guide mindfulness of breathing. Having put your body in a position that feels comfortable, you might also close your eyes, and if not, you can just rest them. Your gaze might be low and soft and steady, either way. Rest your hands on your lap, your legs, the floor. There's no right or wrong position for your hands. Feel the way in which your body is resting on what's below, whether it's a cushion or a chair or a floor. You might feel the weightedness of the body at those points of contact that your body has with whatever is holding it up. And the way in which the body is resting on that chair or cushion or floor. Rest your mind into your body. So we are drawing our attention in and down, and let's allow our attention to find our breath. Locate your breath in the body, wherever the breath is most evident to you. It might be your belly. It might be sensation of rising and falling there, or at the chest, or in your nose. We are resting our attention in this area and noticing our inhales and our exhales. That's the only instruction right now. Notice your inhales and your exhales. Now, what happens for most people is that we notice anything but our inhales and our exhales. Instead, we get to thinking. Distraction happens. It's not a problem. In fact, there's a way to be mindfulness of thinking, be mindful of thinking, but we'll leave that for another day. What I'll suggest now is that each time you get to thinking, whether you're planning or rehearsing or remembering, when you become aware that you're thinking, treat that as a special moment. That's a moment of consciousness when your thinking has has come above the line, out of unconsciousness into consciousness. It's a wakeful moment. You've become aware. And in that moment, with that wakefulness, you'll shift your attention back into the body with the breath. And again, take up mindfulness of breathing, noticing inhales and exhales. Doesn't matter how many times your mind wanders away or for how long you've been away. Take advantage of that magic moment to build the muscle of mindfulness, waking up to distraction and drawing your attention back to the body and the breath. Now I invite you to consider your breath, your inhales and exhales as an anchor. And you can open up a little bit and notice what else is around. So keep about 60% of your attention on the breath, but the sounds, sensations, the activities of the mind, all of them rise and fall around that anchor of the breath. So the breath is centered, or you might say foregrounded, to keep us present here, now. We're also able to notice the other experiences or phenomena that rise and fall in a given moment. You might have to skew a little more closely, a little more narrowly to the breath if you feel unsteady or you've been really distracted. Or if you have some steadiness, maybe allowing the field of attention to broaden. Taking in an ache in the back, or the sound of a bird outside, or a sense of frustration or of ease. What's here now? Okay, if you haven't already, I invite you to shift in your position, lift your gaze, and come back to the group. And if you feel comfortable doing so, turning on your camera. Wonderful. So I thank you all for your kind attention to yourselves and to me during that time. And of course, I'm curious. I would love to hear someone else's voice other than my own, describing what that experience was like. Was it familiar? Not familiar? Interesting? Uninteresting? Easy? Hard? Did it make sense? Was it confusing? All of it's welcome. So does anybody have anything to share? Again, a mindful pause. Hi.
Hi, yeah. So I'm not like done a lot of meditation, but in college, I did like yoga and stuff as far as focusing on breathing. So just as more like a tool for other people, I found it helpful to and I've used it for years, even for going to sleep if my mind's going crazy, to kind of just actually say it out loud, to say, you know, like I'm breathing in, I know I'm breathing in, breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. It's kind of tools to just kind of walk yourself through it. If you get too distracted, it helps me, I guess, as far as not wandering too much with work and other life things.
Oh, wow, that's great. So you know mindfulness practice and you apply it to life.
Yes, it's been very helpful, especially at nighttime when the thoughts wander a lot.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits. It can help with sleep too. Sure. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else? Okay. Wow, let's talk about the benefits. I think that's a great segue, Danielle. Thank you, because you applied it right to life. Let's talk about the things that mindfulness can do. So let me share my screen again. Okay, are we back to the slide? Okay, so benefits of mindfulness meditation. So of course there are myriad benefits, and there are wonderful centers of learning and institutions that are devoting lots of resources to research, neuroscience research that intersects with mindfulness. I'm thinking about the University of Wisconsin, the Greater Good Science Center in Berkeley, Harvard, lots of places. So we have a lot of information these days about what mindfulness can do for us. But I do want to note that this research is really young in terms of research, and even though it's been happening for a couple of decades at least, there's still a lot we don't know. And I've heard some of these claims called into question. But I want to share with you what is most widely accepted at this point. So the physical benefits of mindfulness include improvements in cardiovascular health and the strengthening of our immune system. And mindfulness can assist in coping with temporary or chronic pain. And it increases body awareness, so we can become more attuned to the messages that our body is sending us. And so we can be more responsive to the body and give it what it needs, in terms of food or sleep or exercise. And in terms of emotional benefits, there's emotional regulation, it's a huge one. And in addition, there's this way it can build capacity for connection and positive emotions such as love and compassion and joy. So there are mental benefits, of course: focus, concentration, agility, and we become better problem solvers apparently when we become regular meditators, and it enhances our creativity. And there's this thing that meditators call spaciousness of mind that helps you feel like much more is possible in terms of mental capacity. And professionally, because we're here, because you all work together, I wanted to go over the ways in which mindfulness makes us more productive and effective, and it assists with goal creation and attaining goals. It contributes to, well, helps us contribute to a thriving work culture. And it can generate a deeper, more productive interpersonal relationships. So really useful. Okay, so mindfulness during crisis specifically. So first, let's talk about stress. There are two types of stress I think it's useful to note, and you may very well know this already. So eustress is stress that's beneficial to us, and distress is stress that can harm us. So eustress is stress that we perceive as being within our coping capacity, right? So if a stress stimulus is something that we feel like we are resilient enough to handle, then it can be very beneficial to us. It can be motivating, right? It can motivate us. and can improve our performance. And I'm thinking about how starting a new project with a new team or giving a presentation, right, can produce this kind of stress in the body that compels us into action in a way that matches the stimulus. So distress can be short-term or long-term. It's what we perceive as being outside our coping capacity. And it can produce anxiety and concern, can decrease performance, and can really create wear and tear on the body, right? So when we are stressed, the endocrine system releases hormones, and these hormones are really not great for us. They are there for just helping us take action in the moment, but we don't want those hormones to be in our system for very long. We hope they get dispelled by taking action. So I'm thinking about how it works if we are not invested with the authority we need to get something we've done that we've been asked to do, or we lack the training to do something we are made responsible for. These are kinds of workplace stress that are really distressing. And there's another way to look at stress, and that is whether it is acute or chronic. So acute stress is stress that happens in the moment. There's a stimulus, and we can respond, and the stimulus is gone after a while. Whereas chronic stress is what the body is experiencing when maybe something started out as acute, but we haven't been able to dispel the effects of it, or it hangs around, or it's a situation that snowballs or does not go away. So either the stimulus hasn't left, or our response in the body hasn't left. One way or the other, we have a chronic situation. So the role of mindfulness and stress is really interesting. You saw that list of benefits, so you probably have a sense of its power, or maybe you already knew. I think we heard from Danielle, it's powerful. So if you can think of mindfulness as a preventive strategy, if you're practicing mindfulness often, you have a way of noticing, right? You become aware of how stress feels in the body, and you can do some regulating, right? And rather than stress upon stress, right? With mindfulness, we're able to pause and center and ground and open to things. There's more possibility, there's more creativity, instead of our capacity being limited to simply reacting impulsively. So mindfulness is an incredibly powerful tool. And right now I'm going to invite you to meditate with me again. So again, you can turn your videos off if you'd like. And this time I'm going to just expand our previous practice. We were doing mindfulness of breathing. Now we'll be doing mindfulness of the body. So just looking at how we can use a different anchor in our mindfulness practice. Become mindful, aware of a different domain other than the breath, the body. So get comfortable as you did before. Again, you can rest your eyes by closing them or keeping your gaze low. You can rest your hands. Wherever they fall or lie, it's fine. Allow the body to rest into what's below it. And bring the mind down to rest in the body. Rather than finding the breath with our attention, We're going to keep our attention, our field of awareness quite broad. Imagine attention is filling up your entire body, so that in any given moment, if a sensation arises, a physical sensation, you know it. It could be that you notice in a given moment the pressure of the body on what's below, or you might suddenly be aware of the beating of your heart in your chest. You might have an itch on your neck that you'd like to scratch. Or you might have achiness around the shoulders. The temperature in the room you are in might be cool or warm. And so I'm just giving you examples of the kinds of things that we notice when we embody our awareness, when we become mindful of the body. The same suggestion for distraction applies. There will probably be a dance between distraction and focus. In those moments, you wake up and know you've been distracted, you bring the attention back into the body and anchor it to whatever sensations are arising in a given moment. You have to be agile here because sensations will arise, dwell for a while, change in location or quality or intensity, and pass away. So could be a sensation you're noticing in a given moment is changing. Track it with your attention. This is mindfulness. And if it dissipates entirely or diminishes, notice its absence and be open to what is available to notice next. Mindfulness of the body. There's no guarantee that what you will notice in a given moment will be pleasant. Some of us have aches and pains or areas that are vulnerable from past injury. Oftentimes in noticing those, thought will get going, but we just come back and see if we can notice the bare facts of sensation without judgment. Giving our attention equally to pleasant and unpleasant sensations that arise. And in our last few moments here, see if you can take in the gestalt of the body, the symphony of sensations arising here and there, some simultaneously, dwelling for a while, different lengths of time, and passing away at different times. Feel your whole body from the inside out. So once again, you can shift in your position and lift your gaze and come back to the group and perhaps turn your camera on. And I do want to talk about mindfulness practice, bringing it into life. But before we do, again, the floor is open for any comments or questions about that experience. Okay. All right. So let's talk about mindfulness practice. Once again, I'm sharing my screen one last time. And okay, so I think of mindfulness practice in two categories. Formal and informal is how I usually put it. So formal meditation is sometimes called sitting, which you don't have to sit while you're doing it. So that's kind of a misnomer. But in any case, formal practice might mean setting aside time and space. Maybe you have a cushion, or maybe you have a place in your home where you would cultivate mindful attention for a particular period of time. So you might use a timer or a guided meditation recording. And I highly recommend that, because if we don't put an end time on our sit, then what becomes a feature of that meditation experience is a lot of thinking about how long it's been and how much longer we have to go, or how much longer should we be sitting for. So yes, please use a timer or a recording that has an ending. So formal meditation is how we really build the muscle of mindfulness. And you can start with just 3 to 5 minutes a day. But I recommend starting at a time of day where you know that you are pretty well likely to be able to do it again the next day at that same time. Some teachers recommend attaching your new formal meditation practice to something you do every day. Maybe you meditate for 5 minutes after you brush your teeth in the morning, or right before lunch. But, you know, habit cultivation is really another entire workshop, right? But what I can say here is that if we can manage to establish a formal meditation practice, even if it's short, the benefits will be evident quite quickly. And of course, if you get to establishing one that's 3 to 5 minutes long, then you see about expanding it. And guided meditations are really useful for that, recordings. And you can find your favorite teacher and whatnot. I always recommend Insight Timer. And I think the plan is that I will be recording a meditation for you that will go out in the follow-up email too, so you'll have that if you'd like to use it. So a mindfulness break, it's what I'll call informal meditation, but that phrase actually doesn't do it justice. So a mindfulness break is an in-the-moment practice. These are really effective and important. They may not, like formal meditation, build the practice of mindfulness as quickly, but they are a soothing balm. So we use them as needed. You can think of them as like taking a medication that's prescribed as needed in the moment. Something happens and you want to antidote it or support yourself through the experience. So I'm thinking of a few different mindfulness breaks that I'd like to suggest to you. One is, actually it's very similar to what Danielle suggested. One is using the words here and now. So you could, if you were, say, sitting at your desk in front of your inbox and there are far too many emails that you need to respond to immediately, and that's created the kind of confusion or fogginess or distress, that means that if you start to respond to even one, it's just, you're not going to be very effective at it. You might jump to another. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. In any case, that kind of distress can be met with a pause and if we're ever back in the workspace, maybe our coworkers would be near us, but never know we're doing it. You might just pause and drop your gaze so you no longer see your email inbox. And maybe for 8 cycles of breath, when you inhale, just note the word here, as in I'm here in this body, grounded. And as you exhale, every time you exhale, just note the word now. So that's a reminder that you're in the present moment. So just here on the inhale and now on the exhale can be incredibly helpful, even for 8 cycles of breath or 1 minute, however you want to handle it. So you can be really adaptable with these. Another practice I love to do, I call feet and hands, where I just sit for a moment, I just pause and I notice my feet on the floor. And then I notice my hands, I might rub my hands together first and then rest them. And having rubbed them together, they're kind of lively. There's buzzing and tingling in them. And so it can really draw my attention to them. This is a very grounding mindfulness practice when we put our attention in our hands or in our feet. So I'm wondering, given the time, if we have time to practice that one. So I want to get a sense first. I'll stop sharing my screen. I want to get a sense if there have been any questions, first of all, because I want to save time for that. I don't see any. Okay. So let's just take 2 minutes and do what I call feet and hands. And actually the body's involved too. You'll see what I mean. Okay, so say you're distressed. Say you've just come out of a meeting where things did not go as you'd hoped, you didn't feel heard or you felt misunderstood, or the action items determined at the end take everybody in a direction that you feel is not useful whatsoever. So there may be some distress in the system. You may be overthinking and you might be ready to write an email you probably shouldn't write. So sit down and you might close your eyes. So let's do this together. Wherever you are, you don't have to get in a special posture because this is just a mindful moment break. This is just an in the moment practice. Wherever you are, maybe just bring your attention right down into your feet. Whether your feet are in socks or shoes, whether they are soles on the floor or in another position, just bring your attention right into your feet. Notice the parts of the feet that constitute your foundation. So for most of it's probably the sole, for most of us, the sole of the foot. And just notice any sense of pressure or weightedness there. And then feel the whole foot on both sides, both feet. Feel the whole foot. Feel the feet from the inside out. Now let's draw our attention right up to our hands, wherever they are resting, and notice the weightedness and the pressure in that point of contact. Whether the hands are on the lap or the legs or cushions or desk. Just notice that texture. And then notice the hands from the inside out. So no longer the point of contact, but the entirety of the hands. Now, remaining right where you are, take your hands together and start rubbing them together, palms together, back and forth or in circles. You're creating some heat and some energy. And maybe you do this longer than you feel like doing it, but I recommend it. Really spend a little time here. And then suddenly stop and rest the hands. Now feel the hands from the inside out. There's a liveliness there, likely a buzzing and a tingling that can really anchor our attention now in our hands. Sensation may have been subtle before, but now it's more obvious. And is it possible to feel the body from the inside out in that way right now, just for a few moments? Tap into a sense of aliveness that's here in your inner system. And also notice any areas of ease where there's a settledness. We might combine methods and just for a moment inhale and say here. And exhale and say now. And then you can gently flutter your eyes open if they're not already open. And come back to whatever you were going to be doing. So I combined a couple of methods there because it was so fun to be feeling in. And there's a joy, you know, in connecting into the body and starting to feel like you can regulate your attention and that you have the inner resources to do so. So I'm curious if anybody has questions about starting a practice, a formal practice, or anything about what it's like to sprinkle in the moment practices or mindfulness breaks into the day. Or maybe some of you already have some strategies, some mindfulness breaks I would love to hear about. Okay. Well, I suspect there's a lot of wisdom in the group and you're keeping it to yourself. And I appreciate your kind attention throughout this workshop. And I want to hand it over to Gretchen now to talk about what's next.
Thank you so much, Sarah Jane. I know I definitely appreciated that. And just, you know, coming for myself, coming from a different role, you know, prior to working for Studio B, I was in a banking industry, which was high stress. I had a lot of insomnia, a lot of tension headaches, and had I had this type of mindfulness practice back then, I would have been more successful and a lot less stressed out. Mm-hmm. So just taking the time to recognize some of the reasons why your mind is racing at the end of the day, or when you lay down at night, when everything starts to settle, and just, you know, trying one of these breathing practices and seeing how that makes you feel and seeing how your body responds to it is really a great way to start out. That being said, we are coming back in 2 weeks. Christine Keisinger is going to do a presentation that is going to address the worries behind that we're all going to be facing, whether we're going back and moving forward through the COVID crisis and what that's going to look like. And just based on all of our backgrounds today, we're all working from home. And we're going to recognize what that has looked like and what it's going to look like going forward as we transition back into a work-life integration. So I hope to see you all back here in 2 weeks. And again, we will be providing some follow-up resources today, a guided meditation, and we will make this recording available to the rest of your team.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah Jane, Gretchen, and Christine. And thank you, everyone at New Venture that joined. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Thank you.
See you soon.
See you on the 25th. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.